Could I introduce Mr. Andy Burnham to the stage to give an introduction to this veterans discussion?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. Morning.
I will echo the Lord Mayor in giving the official welcome to Manchester. A very typical Manchester. I'm sure everyone has said, time to end the storm. I think it feels very apt today, doesn't it? Today of all days, but it really is. It really, really is. And I just wanted to sort of maybe add a slightly different perspective today with regard to the bigger issue in this country around justice and support for people to get justice. Because we've seen in the news this week another example where an agency of the British state has caused real harm to people, failed to face up to its wrongdoing, and ruined thousands of families' lives. Obviously, this is the post office that's in the news with the inquiry that's launched this week. But the point I wanted to make at the start is this is only the latest in a long line of injustice that you can trace back through the post-war period. So I want you to come on that journey with me for a moment, if you won't mind, where we just walk that line back through the post-war period and think of some of the injustices that we've seen. Obviously, the biggest, I guess, in the moment we're in now is Grenfell. And those families are still in the courtroom, battling every day. I think supported in some ways by the changes that have come following other campaigns, but still, they are there, and they are struggling, and they are fighting. When none of this was their fault. They were left in harm's way by the failure of regulation and an approach in this country where sometimes we say, oh, the market will solve everything, it will keep everybody safe. Well, it doesn't, and we see where they are now. But then you kind of like take another step a bit further back from Grenfell into the sort of 80s and 90s, and Hillsborough is something that I've been very closely involved with. Lots of parallels, aren't there, where people just going to a football match were left in harm's way by an unsafe ground, a police force that lost control, but then tried to blame those people to deflect its own failings. And that has been a fight that has gone on for over 30 years, and that tells you something. But let's keep tracing this line back, because if you then go a few years before that, you could look at an issue like Orgreave, where miners were wrongly put on trial. It didn't get the attention it should have done, but that is the truth about Orgreave. They were evidence was fabricated against them, they were wrongly put on trial, and the case was dismissed on pretty much the first day in court. Well, let's keep going back again. And if you go into the earlier 80s and into the 70s, contaminated blood, which I think has a real parallel to what we're here to talk about today, where thousands and thousands of people had their health seriously damaged by the negligence of agencies of the British state. And their family's health was subsequently damaged by that too. Again, thousands of families completely broken by it, and they are still in an inquiry today, all those years ago, and they're still in courtrooms trying to get answers and trying to get justice. So let's go into the 70s now, and you can think of Shrewsbury, where building workers, again, were wrongly put on trial, and just last year, their convictions were quashed, just last year. Almost 50 years on from when it first happened. Bloody Sunday, families are still fighting there. Let's go into the 60s, thalidomide. And then we finally arrive at the 1950s and the start of the post-war period. We can think of children from this country who were in the care of the state, who were just sent off to Australia and other places around the world, the child migrants, who were then subject to the most appalling abuse of all kinds. They only recently had a national apology. And now let's bring us to what we're here to talk about today. Our nuclear test veterans. Is this the greatest injustice of them all? I think you could say that it is, as people have said here. This stands out, actually, for being the longest standing injustice, without a shadow of a doubt, in the post-war period. Neglected completely for all of these years, 7 decades. An unbelievable state of affairs. This is the 70th anniversary year. And the thing that I would say is it kind of starts that long line that I've just sort of walked you through. And the reason that's important is, although they've got differences, all of these things, they have two things that are fundamentally kind of true of all of them. The first is that it is negligence that causes the original harm to people, often willful or knowing negligence that puts people in harm's way. But then there's the second injustice, or as David Cameron actually once called it, the double injustice of leaving people in the wilderness after that original harm, just on their own, kind of trying to find answers, fighting without support. That is true of all of those things, all of those scandals that I've just taken you through. But I think this does stand apart, because this wasn't people going to work and trying to protect their jobs, as the miners were doing, or just going to watch a football match, as the Liverpool supporters were doing, or protesting for their rights. This involved people who had signed up to serve this country, and in doing so were sent around the world serving this country, thinking they were going to support the best interests of this country in that post-war period. And they were then, if you like, treated in a way that they thought the enemy might treat them, not our own government, our own authorities. Our own authorities put people in harm's way knowingly. And that is an unbelievable thing, isn't it? And how many of the British public really understand that? Our forces, our servicemen, and I think some women, but mainly servicemen, put directly in harm's way, and left then without the support, never acknowledged properly, and by goodness, what harm did they cause? Not just, though, and this is the point, isn't it? Not just to you, gentlemen behind me, and we've all got just nothing but respect for you, the dignity with which you've carried on calling for what is rightfully yours, truth and justice, but actually your families, the harm that then, I think as Rebecca was saying today, cascaded down through the generations. The harm kept carrying on. The failure to be honest about what happened has left daughters, sons at risk with their own health. And then beyond that, grandsons and granddaughters. This is so wrong. As I say, it takes it up to the level, I think, of being the greatest injustice, because it betrays people who signed up to serve our country, but has reflicted an ongoing, a repeating harm on the generations beyond the people who it originally harmed. Never mind the stress and the anguish that you've gone through trying to get answers over the years. And so this brings us today to this 70th anniversary year of what happened. And I know from my experience with Hillsborough, it often is the milestone year that finally brings people to focus on what actually happened to you all. And I apologize having my back to you, but obviously this is the way the event has got to be today, with it being online. I mean, this brings us to this year. And the question is, what are we going to do about it as a country? What are we going to do about it? It's never too late, in my view, never too late to face up to things and to acknowledge where things are wrong and to make reparation for that wrong. It's never too late to give people the truth. It's never too late to give people justice. And that is what we've got to demand in this year. I want to applaud as strongly as I can Rebecca Long-Bailey, who's here today, and who, if I'm honest, pushed me to do more. She came to see me a few months ago, and then I got Steve Rotherham involved, and we began to make the connection. Rebecca, I think, stands apart for being an MP who was I see somebody who was determined to lead this fight. And I remember from Hillsborough, it does require an MP actually to kind of really grab it. Because a lot will say they support, and it actually doesn't change very much, writing letters here and there, nothing changes. But when an MP of stature grabs a cause like this, that's a change moment. And I think Rebecca is providing a change moment here. And I'm going to say to you all today, I don't believe I did enough for you when I was in Parliament for my 16 years, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry that I didn't do enough. I really say, I look you in the eye and I say I'm sorry. I mean, the only thing I can say in defence is sometimes you can't take on so many. Taking on more than one cause is hard at times, but nevertheless, that sounds like an excuse, and I don't want to make excuses today. I didn't do enough, and nor did my party, nor did anybody that I was in Parliament with at the time do enough. And I want to say that to you all with all sincerity. But I also want to share something with you that might help, because I didn't do enough for the victims of contaminated blood, to be honest. But it was in my last speech in Parliament when I decided to make amends. And for years, I'd seen MPs sort of writing letters asking for bits of money here for people who'd suffered and bits of support there. And it just didn't get anywhere because the state held all the power and they were throwing a few scraps off the table every now and again. It didn't get people anywhere. I made my last speech in Parliament trying to make amends for what I hadn't done enough on. And I threatened to go to the police with evidence that I had that there was criminal medical negligence of the victims of contaminated blood. And I think that helped, working with the other MPs involved, like Diana Johnson. I think it helped move contaminated blood towards a public inquiry. In my view, you are owed by this country far, far more than a medal. Far, far more. You are owed the truth, and your families are owed the truth. You are owed justice, reparation, and accountability to the extent that that is possible. In this 70th anniversary year, the Prime Minister of this country, whoever that is, at the time when it needs to be done, needs to stand at the dispatch box of the House of Commons and make a national apology to each and every one of you and every member of your families who has suffered through these last 70 years. And if that's going to happen, I'm just going to finish by saying this today, and I say it to every single member of Parliament currently serving. Get up off those green benches. Look these veterans in the eye. Look them all in the eye. Listen to what they've got to say. Stand up for what this country is meant to be about. A country that was promoting justice around the world in that post-war period. That, I think, is what you thought you were doing. Bringing peace to nations, promoting democracy and accountability. But where is the democracy and the accountability for you? You haven't had it. You haven't had it at all. So I say to members of Parliament of all sides, this is the moment to step forward. And you must step forward now. You cannot let this year go by without recognising and seeking to right this momentous wrong. As a country, we pride ourselves on our support for the armed forces, and rightly so. But can anyone feel anything other than a sense of shame how these members of our armed forces have been treated? So the onus really is on all of us now not on you anymore. The onus is on us to support Rebecca and anyone else in Parliament who is prepared to look you in the eye, to stand forward now, to stand up for British values of justice, of fairness. And this is the year when we are going to make sure that that happens. And I know I can speak today on behalf of the people of Greater Manchester, because I know they are 100% behind you. They support you. And I know people across the country are behind you too. This is the year when the storm ends. This is the year where this country faces up to what was done. This is the year when our British nuclear test veterans, the last nuclear test veterans of any power, of any nuclear power in the world, finally get answers, get justice, get recognition from their government. This is the year that that is going to happen, be it in the form of a public inquiry, compensation full. Well, all of it is what we demand. And Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, Members of Parliament, Members of the House of Lords, can I just say to you all, we demand it now. Thank you very much indeed for listening.